Hello, welcome to Empower and to this quick hit about the pipeline's built-in channels. I'm Angel and I'm a software engineer here at QuickBase. Today, I will take you through some of the built-in channels, their features, and a demo which will showcase what you can do using them. The main goal will be to understand how the pipeline's built-in channels provide new ways to free and automate your data. So, what can you learn from this quick hit? You'll get introduced to some of the pipeline's built-in channels and information about them. Later on in the demo, we'll talk about how you can automate your data flow and how to combine and make the most out of the built-in channels. Here is a list of the pipeline's built-in channels. The focus today would be more on the bucket, CSV handler, and callable pipelines, which you will see in action later in the demo. The other built-in channels are called clock, text, webhooks, and JSON handler. Let's start with the bucket channel. It gives you the ability to define and work with tables on the fly and use them for the duration of the pipeline. You can add new rows to the defined tables using data from a source of your choosing. And when you're ready with all the changes to the table, you can export it to a convenient CSV format. The CSV handler is used for fetching a CSV from a source of your choosing and then iterating over the records in it, being able to apply conditions and limits. Callable pipelines is a channel which goal is to make and receive calls between different pipelines. While doing so, you can pass arguments from the caller pipeline to the callee pipelines. The next channels that we will mention are used in more complex and advanced scenarios, and you can learn more about them in some of our other topics featured in this year's Empower. The clock channel gives you the ability to add a sleep timer in a pipeline step if so happens that you need to wait a certain time for something. The text channel is primarily used for working with regular expressions. The JSON handler is used for fetching a JSON from a source of your choosing and then iterating over the records in it, being able to apply conditions and limits. And the webhooks channel general goal is to give you the ability to make and receive HTTP requests if you happen to need to do so. Now, let's get to the demo. Before we begin, the main idea of the demo is to show you how to combine and use the pipeline's built-in channels according to your needs. As stated before, we will be using the bucket, CSV handler, and callable pipelines channels for the demo. In this particular use case, I will use the pipeline's built-in channels to create a table in which I will add all the events I have been to for a month. You are going to see how you can define new bucket tables, filter all your events from a supported calendar for a given month, add them to the table on the fly, and later export them to a convenient CSV file, which you can upload to some of our supported drives. You will also see how using callable pipelines, you can split your work so it is easier to manage. As you know, many people nowadays are working from home, so this can be a great way to track how many events have you been to this month and how much time did you spend in them. Here is a simple diagram to get you more familiar with the demo. We'll start by defining the new bucket table. Then we'll search through all the calendar events while adding them to the bucket table. Then we'll prepare the bucket table in a convenient CSV format and pass it as an argument to the next pipeline. Here, I'm using callable pipelines to split my work into pipelines, so they're more easily manageable. The second pipeline will receive the call from the first pipeline, carrying over the URL for the CSV of the previous bucket table. The CSV handler will fetch the CSV and it will iterate over the CSV records with some conditions applied. Then we will define a new bucket table and add the filtered records to the new bucket table. Then again, we'll prepare in the same way the bucket table as a CSV and upload it to a drive of our own choosing. Now let's get on to the hands-on demo. So we'll start by defining a table using the define table step from the pipeline rows resource of the bucket channel. Here we will state comma-separated lists of column names, and then we'll say what is the type of every column. The event will be a string, the start and finish would be datetime, and the duration will be a number. Then we'll search all my calendar events. Here, for the purpose of the demo, I'm using Google Calendar, but you can use any of our supported calendars. Then I'll add each event as a new row in the table. With some Jinja, we can state the event, start, finish, and the duration in hours. Here I'm using a simple Jinja expression to calculate the duration of the event in hours. Then we'll prepare the bucket table in a convenient CSV format, which will give us a URL, which we can use in the next step, or we can download to our computer. In the final step, we'll make a call to the second pipeline. Here in the code definition, we'll state that we want to pass the URL as argument. And here, again using Jinja, we'll get it from the previous step. Now let's get to the second pipeline. It starts by receiving the call from the first one, carrying over the URL. The CSV handler will fetch the CSV and by just passing the URL. Then it will iterate over the CSV records, and we need to state that we have a header line and just state our header columns, again specifying their types. The start and finish are datetime, so here we just say they're a string. Then we apply some conditions. I have stated that I want to filter for 2021 April, but with some Jinja, you can make this more dynamic. Then we are defining a new bucket table, exactly the same way as the previous one, with the exact same header row and the exact same types. We want to keep it the same as the first one. Then for each of our already filtered events, we add a new row, exactly the same way as before. Then again, we prepare the CSV. And as a final step, we'll upload it to a drive of our choosing. I'm using Google Drive, but you can use whichever supported drive you want. Now, let's see the whole thing in action. We're going to start by running the first pipeline and turning on the second one. It will define a table and find all my events. It will start adding new rows. It will generate the CSV. Here you can see the downloadable URL. And it will trigger a call passing the URL to the second pipeline. The second one will begin by being called, carrying over the URL with the CSV of the previous bucket table, and the CSV handler will fetch it. Then it will iterate over the records with the filters applied. It will define a new table and add the already filtered events as new rows. Again, we'll generate a CSV. Here you can see again download URL, and we'll upload it to Drive. And if we go to our Drive, we can see our newly created April monthly report. And if we open it, here we can see our convenient table with the events I have been to this month, their start and finish times, and their duration. So, in conclusion, today we learned how the pipeline's built-in channels provide new ways to free and automate your data. They are an essential part of making your workflow even better. Thank you for your attention. To dive more into the topic of the pipeline's built-in channels, you can watch Scott Galloway's session about callable pipelines. See you again and have a great Empower.